Episode of Film Talk is brought to you by HostGator. HostGator is a leading provider of shared, resold VPS and dedicated hosting solutions. Their award-winning support is available 24/7 via phone, email, and live chat. Discover why over 9 million websites trust HostGator and sign up for a new hosting package using the coupon code GAMEITALL and receive 25% off your first hosting plan.
Hey everyone, this is another edition of Film Talk for GameItAll.com. This is Brendan Wall here with Jared Callahan, the writer-director of, actually this is a first for us because usually I think everybody so far it's been to promote a fiction feature film. So this is the first documentary feature film, Janey Makes a Play. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited to be with you.
And I did get to check out the film as well, so I was right off the bat. I gotta say it's very entertaining. It's a very entertaining film, and I find like may not be all the time, but I feel like sometimes a documentary is harder to maintain people's interest than a fiction film. So especially if the person watching the film, especially if you face an audience who maybe either I don't want to say doesn't have an interest, but maybe it's something that doesn't generally appeal to them. So I gotta say, yeah. Do you find that harder to do right off the bat, just to appeal to an audience with a documentary rather than a fiction?
Oh yeah, there are different kinds of documentaries, and I right from the get-go, you could make the decision to tell the story with like words on the screen that set up for you what life in a small town is like, and make it like an infographic and charts and stuff. But it wasn't that kind of movie. Like I feel like we had so much quality story that we viewed it really in the editing like a narrative. We would say, okay, what are the story arcs and who are the characters and what's going on in their lives? And so, unlike fictional narrative where you can just choose all of those things, a lot of those things we knew the people and we watched and experienced their life over the course of. In the movie, they are producing a community theater play, and so we knew if you're going to make a play, you're going to have auditions, you're going to have rehearsals, you're going to have Hell Week, like the week leading up to opening night, and then you're going to have opening night. And if you try and make a play as a group of people, there's only a couple options. One, you don't make it to opening night, right? Or two, you make it to opening night and it sucks, or you make it to opening night and you pull it off. So we would story arc and map all these things out and say, if this happens, or if this happens, or if this happens. So I take it as a compliment in that we just made it like a movie. So that way you don't have to love theater, you don't have to love documentaries to be able to let yourself be immersed in this culture and small town America, and then in the life of this 90-year-old protagonist who is writing and directing original community plays. So yeah, that's actually was my hope. I didn't want it to be just for people from small towns or old people or theater lovers. It's for all of those things, but I hope that it's got some appeal to a general audience as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it does. I just think it in general it's harder, I think, to do that with a documentary. It's almost like you're kind of improvising as you go, and it's in some form because you have to kind of be prepared for everything, right?
Yeah, we planned out as much as we could, but at some point you just don't know what's going to happen. Like you don't, it's real life. And that's why I think I never set out to be a documentary filmmaker. I have projects going and scripts that I'm writing, and I work in as many different areas as I can. But real life is just so strange. Like a lot of times you can't write real life. Like I have this documentary, another one that I'm working on, we're editing right now, that if you wrote it like a feature script, people would read the script and you would say, no, like no, that doesn't happen. That can't happen. That doesn't happen to real people, but it happened to my friend named Dan. So when we make a documentary, it allows me, as soon as you know it's real, to kind of get sucked in a new way. So I think that there's different roles for narrative fiction and narrative documentary, but in some ways they kind of overlap. And that's one of my favorite ways they overlap is story is transformative and story is powerful. And if you resonate with the characters and let them into your heart or soul or headspace, then it can move you. And I think for me, documentary, I've just been fortunate to be meeting these people like Janey, this 9-year-old, they're just exceptional people. So it's kind of a no-brainer for me on some of these feature doc projects. So.
Um, and now tell me, because I understand, now I don't, if this is incorrect, I might have read this wrong, but I understand Janie is your grandmother?
Yeah, well, so they always say, write what you know, right? In school,
Yeah.
and in my undergrad, they say, oh, you're going to be a writer, write what you know. And I'm a upper middle class white male right now. Like that's not a story that there's no struggle. Like what? Like, and I say that as humbly as I can. Like I'm not living a story where you just go, wow, like, tell me about your life, mid-30s-year-old white guy. It's like, I want to go find the stories of the people that are struggling, that are overcoming, that are dominating, that are living these incredible stories. And so, right, I looked around my life and I have friends and now like family members that are doing incredible things. And maybe the best part about Janey is that she doesn't see what she's doing as special. Like nobody in the community, they call themselves the No Small Thing Productions, which is so perfect, that her community theater troupe. None of them get it. It's just life. It's like, of course this is life. This is what we do. And when I kind of made this movie and held this mirror back up to them and said, can I show you how incredible what you're doing is? Like, Janey started writing these original plays when she was 80 years old. Like, who at age 80 says, I know what I'll do. I'll start this production company in my small town and I will make original plays that stand up for the little people and tell David and Goliath stories and give the children and the adults a place to come together in the theater to tell our own stories of Rio Vista. Like, who thinks that? So when I followed them along, I just was filming how great they are and then got to show them back to them. So yeah, Janey and her being my grandmother was my access to the story. But she has like over 20 grandkids. We're as close as you could be for having a ton of grandkids and not living in the same city. Like, I was always just impressed that she would know all our names and birthdays. Like, honestly, like, I didn't know. I learned a lot about her and about myself and my family through the course of making the film, for sure.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say, because even in the film you pointed out it's a very, very, very large family.
Oh, it's crazy. And they would take on extra kids. I mean, she was the kind of a person who cared, but also she was kind of like this freewheeling mom. So they really had almost probably too much control of their lives as teenagers. But in a small town, she kind of just trusted the town to raise her kids. And it was great because my aunts and my uncles owned the whole town. I mean, Rio Vista is so small. It's the kind of place where you literally introduce yourself by the year you graduated high school. So even in filming the movie, people would be like, who are you? And I'd be like, well, I'm Janey Callahan's son. He graduated 71. And you're referencing the only high school in town. And then they'd be like, oh, I went to school in between Timmy and Tommy, your uncles. Or, oh, I know Katie and Teresa, your aunts. And you kind of rank yourself based on this like 20-year window where there were Callahan kids coming through Rio Vista High School. And that window was big enough that it opened enough doors that we could make this movie. So if you didn't know Janey, then you knew one of her kids. That's for sure.
Yeah, so because of the fact that she's your grandmother, I find it does allow the documentary to be a lot more. Well, at least you were able to access things a lot easier. Do you think that would have? I mean, obviously that helped a lot. Do you think it would have been different if maybe you were filming it as just like a woman that you knew of doing the same thing?
Oh, totally.
That'd have been a different.
Upon the first meeting where Janey brought us in to meet the other members of the troupe, she didn't say, hey, this is a filmmaker and his award-winning filmmaker friends who are going to make a movie about us. She said, this is my grandson, Jared. He and his friends are going to film me or want to film a movie about us. And they all went, great, like, awesome. And then only one set of people, like one couple, Googled me, like Googled us as filmmakers. And they came up to me the next day and they're like, we Googled you. And I was like, oh, really? Great, And they said, we watched one of your friend's movies on Netflix. And I was like, oh, good, you did great. How was it? And they went, there's a lot of cussing, but we liked it. And then they like kind of like winked and nodded and walked away. And I was like, oh, that was it. Like, we passed. Like, they liked the movie and there was a lot of cussing, but they, So from that moment on, it was all open doors. And part of that is Janey, but part of that was the small town and the trust that they had. But I think once Janey said, I have the same last name. So once Janey trusted me and I'm a part of the whole Callahan clan, it was very easy to walk into places. And I think, honestly, just please and thank you and being friendly gets you a lot further than I think a lot of people will give it credit for. Respecting people if they didn't want to be on camera. But most people did. And honestly, we shot, by choice, we shot on DSLR, Canon 7D and 5D cameras. So they wouldn't be threatening video cameras with threatening mics and all this stuff. We just shot on DSLR photo cameras so that as people were talking with us, I was still filming, but I honestly think they didn't forget it. It's not like it was a trick, but I think they forgot we were filming because the movie is so natural. You really, as an audience member, halfway through realize like you're kind of just another member of the troupe, and the camera moves and we're right next to people's faces and hands and on stage with them during dress rehearsals, and they just completely forgot about the cameras, which I think really adds to like what we were able to capture on film. So.
Well, that's also interesting, yeah, because I was going to say it does seem it doesn't, yeah, because you watch a couple documentaries And it definitely seems like sometimes occasionally people are acting for the camera, a little bit, because they definitely know it's there, especially if you watch a lot of older ones, because the cameras are so
So,
huge
and
and
making a
clunky,
noise,
right?
they'd be like, brrr, like you can't
Yeah.
ignore it, you're right? This movie couldn't have existed 20 years ago, just because I couldn't have afforded film stock, period. So, like, this movie exists because digital cameras are a thing, but then also, I think the intrusion would have changed the story. And I think, like, Doc Theory said, like, your presence changes something. So, me being there obviously changed something as the way it would have happened without me there, but what you get in this movie, at least, is pretty close to just it's teleportation. Like, it's you being teleported and time traveling into this season of Rio Vista in 2012, and like that's a special thing. And for the people that I film, I try and describe it like a time capsule. Like, what I'm doing for you is not always like trying to say, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Like, I want to capture what's really happening in a way that you can watch this movie 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years later and say, that's what life was like when I did this event. Like, this is a time capsule for me and my family. And really, like, Janey is doing really well now, but she's 94, so she's not going to be around that much longer. And to think that someday I might have kids, or she'd have other great grandkids or great great grandkids that will have never known her, but can watch this movie and go, like, they really, her. Like, people watch a movie and they just want to hang out with Janey and get a hug from her, or dance with her. She doesn't dance very well, but she still, like, tries to move.
She has a few moves in the movie.
Grandma moves. It's all in the hands, right? You, like, can't do a whole lot of knee raising, but yeah.
That's another thing too, is she's yeah, I was gonna say that's another thing too. She seems very hands-on when she's directing, like the performers and stuff, much more so than you would expect from a 90-year-old woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because she's doing it for the kids. She's quick to say that, like, oh, we're doing it for the kids. But then it lights her on fire. Like, she does all the dance moves in the front row, and she reads all the words with the actors as they read the words. Like, I really feel like if you don't use the talents and gifts that you've been given in this life, then you end up losing them. They go stale, or they go rot, or you don't refine them. But Janey's using it so well that I honestly think it's like why she's still alive. Probably. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Like, she's still alive and healthy because she's creating and thinking and coaching and dancing and teaching into her mid-90s now. So
yeah. And I wanted to say too, another thing I wanted to mention is obviously Janey as well, but most of the characters, if not all, are very colorful. And I want to know if you had any hard times or anything trying to bring that out in people, or did you get a lot of people that were kind of iffy in front of the camera? I noticed one, but I like that you left it in, because there's this one girl, Kiana,
yep.
And she has some awkward shyness, but it really fits. It still works, like, because it's very genuine.
Yeah.
But did you have anyone else like that? Like,
man, we had to. So one of the best parts about this movie for me is that you can see yourself or people in each character. And so for Kayana, you could just see awkward sophomore high school female drama kid. And she's like exactly that. And she's self-aware. She like made jokes about herself, right? And like she's funny, but she is like stereotypical, exactly what you would think. Like literally wearing punk rock clothes and like listening to that music. And she's just stereotypes are terrible in some ways because they put people in boxes. But then when you watch this movie, you realize like, oh, those exist for a reason. Like there are these people that are perfectly fitting that. But then I want you very quickly to realize that she's so much more than that. So the one person I had to coach was Sean. He was the stereotypical high school jock. He's literally like out of High School Musical or something. He's like the jock who wants to go be in theater, be on stage, but he's got those two lives going on. But he is such a high school boy that in test screening, some audience members were like, cut him out. I can't stand it. But then other people were like, leave it in. He is high school male embodied. And so Sean, when we started filming, was like really hamming it up. He was on a show. He'd like turn and like wink at the camera, And there was a point in the filming that I just put the camera down and I was like, Sean, just so you know, like very just man to man. At this point, you're probably not in the movie. And you could see him like stop for a second because he was like the lead of the play. So I think he just thought he would be the lead of the movie. And I just said, I want to capture the real people. And every time I put on a camera, you're like putting on a show. So you either start being yourself or I'm just going to cut you out of the whole movie. And I was like, can you handle that? And he went, oh yeah. And I put the camera back on him. And from that moment on, he was just himself. He's a ham and he's a goofball and he's fidgety. But he stopped playing it up. And so that was about probably halfway through filming. And I'm glad I had that moment with him because I really need him. You need him in the movie. And without him, it'd be a bummer. But he started being himself, and then I used everything from the second half of filming with him as his stuff in the movie. So
Yeah, that's cool. And like I said,
Kai.
sorry, it's Kai. Okay. Um, yeah, no, I just like that she stood out a lot too because she was so much different
Yeah.
than everybody else in the film.
Yeah, it seems like that sometimes you think are going to exist only in big cities, but that's a town of a couple thousand people on a river in the middle of nowhere, and that's we exist
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
and like you were saying, stereotypes can be bad, like can be terrible and awful and everything, but it's like there's usually a little inkling of truth in them, like how they started, right? There's always something that it wasn't just out of thin air, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm curious about your background then. Did you do any theater when you were younger, or just stage directing or anything like that?
No, my theater involvement, people ask if I was involved in Janey's plays growing up. They started doing the plays right as I left for college. So I did like elementary school theater. I remember doing a couple of those plays. I did church theater growing up, like where they do like an annual Christmas pageant and stuff like that. So I've been on stage. I did speech and debate in college, so I was comfortable being up in front of people. And then in college, I studied media communication and production. So with that major, you do a little bit of everything. So I had a radio show for a couple of years of college. I did commercial editing. I did newspaper and yearbook and TV news and short filmmaking and all, just as they put you in creative writing, they put you in as many of those classes as you can. And through that course of that, found video making and filmmaking as kind of a passion of mine or something that sparked me. So I never got to be in any of the plays with Janey, but so many of my cousins and aunts and uncles, like all that archival footage that's in the movie, I'm related to like half of those people. Like those are all our cousins. I tried really hard to get every single cousin and aunt and uncle into the film. And I did a pretty good job. Like I think I got everybody at least a little bit of a shout out. So I knew that they would give me crap for that if I didn't. So yeah.
I was almost half expecting you to make a cameo in the play at the end of the movie.
Not in the play, but I'm in the movie in Janey's second marriage when she gets married to Ron. I'm the redheaded 8-month-old baby that she kisses on the forehead. That's me. So it's a real short shot. But I squeaked in there. So
that's your Hitchcock cameo.
That's my Hitchcock.
Okay, and this is your writing / directing debut on a feature-length film, right?
Yeah, I was an assistant director on one other feature film called I'm Not a Hipster. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix or Hulu, maybe you should watch it. It's better than the title. But my film education basically came for the last 10 years. I've had the privilege to work with a ton of students and friends on a bunch of their short films. And one of the guys who was in our friend group, who's just by far the most talented, was named Destin Cretin. And he invited us to work on his short film called Short Term 12. And then in 2009, I was like the assistant director on those movies. That kind of blends my ability to think like a creative, but then I have the ability to be really loud and direct a big group of people at the same time. So I was the assistant director on Short Term 12, which was a short film that we filmed in 2008. And then in 2009, that got into Sundance and won the Grand Jury Prize for short filmmaking in 2009. So for Destin, who did it all, I mean, he wrote, directed, edited, did the soundtrack. I mean, he's like the man. That took his career in a direction, and everybody else started making as much as they could. And then the next year, he invited us to work on his feature film debut called I'm Not a Hipster, and I was the assistant director for some of that film. And then it got into Sundance, and then from there, he made Short Term 12 the feature, and now he's working on like crazy big stuff. I think Brie Larson is like in his next movie, so he's made it. Now our friend group is like everybody's doing as much as they can. Brad teaches film in high school and was my editor. Joel, who did all the music for Destin's movies, did the music for Janey Makes a Play. Destin, Ron, and Lowell, part of the film community producers and directors, and Destin were our project advisors on Janey. Everybody is so willing to help. That it's really shaped me as a creative. So yeah, this is my first project at the helm, but I've been able to see them do their pieces of the job for years, and it's really been the way that I've learned to make movies. So I would like to think that in the future, as I have other projects, that I'll be able to send it to them as a rough cut and say, hey, beat it up. What do you think? Like, help this be better. And we'll continue to be that for each other. So
I'm curious to know also, because a good section of the film focuses on the town of Rio Vista and the financial problems they were having. Just curious if you know if anything has changed there? Like any updates on the town, like how they're doing since then?
Yeah, it hasn't changed too much, which is the sad part. We filmed in the fall of 2012, and at that point, the unemployment rate was like hovering at 18% or something, and that's when it was like 10 or 11% nationally. So it was way worse. It was like one of the worst regions in the United States for work. So I'm sure it's below that because it can't be that high still. But it like practically, it doesn't feel any better. Like there's still empty, shop spaces on Main Street. Yeah, it's just tough. I think it's just tough to be in a small town right now, and it's tough when your industries are based on tourism, and like you run restaurants and you run fishing trips and you run like golf and tourism stuff, and people have stopped vacationing in some ways with the recession, so they're really struggling still. There's a group in Rio Vista of people called Rio Vision, and they've like really taken it upon themselves to do town beautification and running events for the town, and I think they even fought to keep the pool open in town. So the attitude isn't bleak. Like they're fighters, and people are moving there still, so it's a great place to live. Because you really are tucked away. You're like 45 minutes or an hour from San Francisco, and you're 45 minutes from San Francisco or from Sacramento, but you're really in the middle of nowhere, and so people like living in that kind of space, but it's still hard to exist in a small town like Rio Vista.
Yeah, and it really, like you were saying earlier about documentaries, this documentary acts like as a narrative. It almost could be like a fiction film because it's all about like all these plays that Janey is writing, kind of bringing the whole town together. Kind of helps them like escape their the real issues.
Yeah, and that's the powerful moment. Not to ruin it for anyone, but like no spoiler alerts. But when you get to the end, like that's the powerful moment for me is like watching the people of the town. And so when you realize that the people who are in the play are telling their own story on stage, that's why this movie for me is a feature instead of a short film, right? Like if that wouldn't have been the plot of her new play, like a big businessman is slick and comes into town and he's gonna buy it up and take it all over and turn it into a parking lot for his factories, and the small town rallies together to fight off the big businessman, like if that was what was really happening, and so if they weren't telling that story, I think I would have just made a cute short film about an old lady who makes plays. But once you realize that they're telling their own story on stage like that, then the movie has this like extra deep levels that make you care and connect those things on stage. So yeah, it's kind of cathartic for them, not only for as a community for friendship, but also in getting their stories out there. So
yeah, no, it definitely sets it over the top. The fact the play is like reflecting the real life struggle.
It's crazy, right? I mean, that's like we had to do it, and nobody else could have made this movie. Really, like without access to them, you don't have this movie. And that's where it was like, oh, this, as a creative person, you have ideas all the time. Like we have ideas all the time for shorts or ideas or commercials or sketches or comedy. I don't even like do stand-up comedy, but I have like a note in my phone, like stand-up comedy. Like you just have these things like going all the time because you don't know how they're going to like piece together. And for every 100 ideas, most of them just kind of fade away, but one or two of them will get louder and louder and louder. And that's how the idea for this movie came. Like once it just popped into my head, I wrote Janey Makes a Play in my phone at Christmas in 2011, and that idea kept getting louder and louder and louder. So I think it's access and it's quality of story, but it's also, if I don't tell the story, will anybody else tell it? And if I don't tell the story now, will I lose it forever? And that was the thing, is like this couldn't be put on the list of like, well, I'll do it in 10 years. She might not be doing it at 100. She might not be doing it at 95. But at 90, she was doing it. And so it made like the window to make this film was exactly when we made it. So I'm proud of that.
So I was going to ask you because documentary, like a lot of documentaries, especially on a big scale, involve a lot of research teams and all this stuff. And like it is about a small town, but you still did a lot of research on the history of the town and everything. I'm just wondering how big the crew was for this.
It was me and a couple of friends. Yeah, that's it.
Oh wow,
and
that's impressive.
We just, the whole movie was like funded by me to get it from idea onto a hard drive of raw footage. So it was just me calling in like a decade's worth of favors in the film industry. So I called in all my friends and I piecemeal them together for a couple different weekends, and we'd fly up. My parents would pick us up. We'd sleep on their floor or on their spare beds and couches, and then we'd go into Rio Vista, film as much as we could on a weekend, or be there for like the week of Hell Week. We'd be there the whole week. Come back to San Diego, that's where I lived at the time, and put all together and start trying to amass of what would turn into a whole movie. Even at one point, my dad, who's kind of hard of hearing, we needed a sound guy. So I taught my dad with his like hearing aids. My dad's like following us around with this microphone, right? And it's like, I was like, I don't know what we're getting, but we're getting something, and I hope it's good. So in the end, like we had a financier see some rough footage, come on board, paid my friend Brad to help edit. Then we got some finishing finances. So there were more people in the credits than just a couple of us, but really like the lion's share of the work up front came from a small group of people pouring their hearts and souls into making this movie. So the research part of it, though, that came from the town historian. Phil Pizzalia is this,
Right.
He has a brain that's like a steel trap. And if you ever can go to Rio Vista, go to the museum because it is amazing. And the stories he tells are so detailed, and he helps Janey with her research. So I just said, Phil, like, what photos do you have and what video do you have? And he let us up into the attic of the museum because people, when they pass away in town, if their family doesn't know what to do with all the old photos and video, they just donate it to the museum. So he has a huge attic full of unsorted, untouched artifacts. And he just let us root around up there with him. And he'd be like, here's a VHS tape. Here's a VHS tape from 1982. Oh, here's some film stock from 56. Oh, here's, and so he just like, literally, we're walking through this museum carrying stacks of tapes. I looked over, like, I have some of them over here still. I got to return them in my office. And we would just watch them. And so sometimes they're nothing. They're like the high school, whatever, you know, like homecoming football game, whatever. But then some of them were like gold mine archival footage from the Rio Vista fishing parade and bass derby from the, you know, some of that stuff was from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and it ends up making it into the movie, and it provides this wonderful depth and context for the city. So that shout out goes to Phil. And then all my aunts and uncles provided all the old Janey footage. So that's cool. I saw stuff I'd never seen. I saw my dad as a 3-year-old. Like in some of that old footage from the 50s and 60s, my dad's like a tiny child. And it was so cool to see things about my family that I had never seen before. So.
And yeah, no, and he's in the film, and you do touch on that a bit, so it's interesting that you were able to actually use that as a resource.
Yeah.
But I would think that the people of Rio Vista, especially him and Janey, and you know, people really involved in the behind the scenes aspect of the play, were probably very grateful that you're kind of exposing them to the outside world, I would say, right?
Yeah, it was really special. It was a special moment to show them the film. It took a long time to get them the film, and post-production on any movie takes a long time, like, you know, up a year, 18 months, and that's like if you have a full team going full time. Well, at the time, I was working a full-time job that was not film related and was trying to get this movie funded. And so when I finished filming them in November of 2012, there were people in January, like 2 months later, saying, "So can we see the movie?" And I just was like, you have no clue what I'm trying to do. And so I pieced together this teaser that just had a clip of every interview I did, because we did like over 65, 60-ish interviews for the movie. So I just pieced together every interview and put it into a minute and a half and sent that to everyone. And then people stopped asking me, because they shifted in their minds from, oh, he's just going to film the play and put it together, to, oh, like he interviewed the town barber and the mayor and the newspaper, like local newspaper editor, and Janey's kids. And, you know, like, so then you could see how big it was going to be. And then they waited another year and a half. So it was real special, the moment when I got to bring the final film to Rio Vista and to show it. We showed it in the same room that they do the plays. And they did the Friday night premiere for only people who had been in the plays before. So they packed out the room. It seats 130 people. It was completely packed. And we showed this movie, and it was real meta. Like, the movie was playing on the stage that's the stage in the movie for the people who are in the movie. And I was in the back like, are they going to like it? Are they not going to like it? And it took them a little while to warm up. You can tell with audiences, there's a couple of moments that are funny. And an audience, whether they laugh or chuckle or don't laugh, will tell you how good an audience it's going to be as soon as you realize, like, oh, it's funny and they're in on the joke. So the cast and crew screening, they were kind of quiet at the beginning. And I was like, got nervous. I was like, oh, no, they're not into it. Then I realized halfway through, they just didn't know what it was going to be. So once they had all seen their faces on screen and realized that we weren't making fun of them, that it was like a heartfelt thing, then they loosened up. I just got goosebumps. The second half of that screening was unreal. They were like laughing and cheering and crying, and oh, it was so cool. Like at the end, like they clapped for me, but I was clapping for them, and like we're all like just crying. It was so good, and so it was so worth the like 2.5 year wait that they waited to get that film. So oh, so wonderful. It's just, that was like the best part of the whole thing. I don't know if I told you this yet, but when Janey saw the movie for the first time, what she said, she watched the movie, and I was like really nervous. It was just like a family screen. There was like 20 of us packed into her little basement. We watched the movie, and at the end of the movie, everybody kind of like turns to see what Janey's going to say, and she laughs, and then she was like, well, that was great, but who's that old lady on screen? She was like, what kind of response is that? It was perfect, though, because then we all went out to pizza at the pizza shop that's in the movie, and everyone just talked about how, great it was to see her and kind of like in her element, she's in her element. So.
Yeah, and that's going to be a huge relief, because I know that's another hard thing to do with documentaries is sometimes people, when they do see that mirror, they're like, oh, that they think that you put a spin on it when that's actually how they are, and they're just not used to seeing that, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, people are very self-conscious in front of a camera, and then how they're going to be portrayed. Even me, I don't like the way I sound on a phone, right? Like anytime you could rewatch this, and I'm like, that's what I actually sound like? Like, I don't like that. So I have to be aware of that. I really coach people into trying to help them as a filmmaker. I think you're trying to get, whether it's an actor or a person, a documentary, like a real person that you're filming. Actors are real people too. Someone playing themselves.
Some of them.
Right?
Some of them.
Yeah, right. Zing. But your goal as a good director is to help people feel comfortable in their skin, whether they're pretending to be someone or they're just trying to be their best self, or their true self. And to get that performance out of them is really the art of it. And to make them feel comfortable with me and a trust of me, and then a trust in my skills, and then me knowing when to turn and let them see a clip, is like, because most of the time I wouldn't. I don't want them to be affected by it at all. But if I could tell that someone was being self-conscious around me, then sometimes I'd pull them over and be like, I'd show them a clip of someone else. I'd be like, hey, look how good Tom's looking. Isn't that great? This is going to go great. And so you're really like, that's the directing that happens, is you're really watching for their interactions and how they're responding to you, and not letting yourself taint or ruin the room, like poison what's going on, but to help be the spark that can help it be its best self. So, and you know that when you're editing, you find those moments and then you build around those moments. So I'm editing a film right now. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is like, I've got this girl. She's not always super comfortable on camera, but she's so incredible. And so I'm going in the edit to find these key moments, and I'm going to build around those moments. So.
Yeah, and also when you mentioned you're not a big fan of letting people like kind of look at the monitor after you're done filming, it's weird because I like personal experience, not a fan of that either, but I see that all the time, and I don't understand it.
Well, we're so tuned to it, right? Like our phones, and now we know how we look. I've seen people use their selfie as like a mirror, right? They're like doing lipstick or cleaning themselves up. So we're so used to this being around all the time as this reflection of like, it's literally reflecting in my face. It's not even on. So we're so used to our image and like image control that it's hard to coach them out of that, to say, hey, you stop thinking about that. You just start being you, and people will like you. I said that a lot in the last couple of weeks. I filmed a feature doc for the last 2 weeks. I just got back from filming this doc feature, and that was the coaching I did with these 20-year-olds that I was filming all week. But just like, hey, don't worry about it. I got you. Like, I got you. And then if I could tell that they weren't wearing their makeup or didn't feel into it, I would just put the phone down. Because I filmed half the movie on an iPhone 6. And it was incredible because people just forget you're there. Like, right? You're so used to people being on their phone like this all the time anyway. What's the difference between me doing this and me doing this? Yeah. And not a lot. And so I would go into things with it. I shaved so I looked as young as I could. And I would follow them into stuff. Like, I was at stuff that I should not have been filming at, and like classes and deep conversations and tension, and I would just like do this, or I'd like prop it up on something, and I would like get these incredible shots, but they were ignoring me because once you hold the phone, you're kind of invisible. So I don't know, I'm sorry, that was a kind of a tangent, but that's the future right now for me. That's the current spot for documentary filmmaking, is how can I be as invisible as possible to get the most natural, like, not production, but performance as possible. So
yeah. And I think that's a problem, and not a problem, but I think that's a challenge in any documentary film. I mean, you look at something like Bowling for Columbine, and it's very, like, I don't want to say, I'm not saying it's fake or anything, but I mean, they know the camera's there the whole time, pretty much every shot, and it's very difficult to get like a natural reaction.
Totally. People forget that there's genres within genres. So like, animation isn't a genre. Animation is a medium. Like anime is very different than Disney. Like those are trying to be different things, And so I think same in documentary. We say documentary and feel like, oh, I don't like documentary. Where you're like, well, within documentary, there's like March of the Penguins Bowling for Columbine, and Janey Makes a Play, and those are all trying to do very different things. Like those are and what's the Al Gore climate change one? Like, think about, you add that one to a fourth one, right? Like, there's so many different, or Inconvenient Truth. Like, those are so different things, but they all just get lumped into documentary. But I'm not trying to be a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not trying to be a movie that puts all these like title cards up that tells you what to feel. Like, I'm just going to show you this big story through this really small window of this one community as they make a play, So.
And it's weird too, because on the flip side, you don't hear people saying, "Oh, that's a fictional film." I'm not really into those.
Right? Nobody would ever do that, ever. We
No.
we subcategorize them out to like dramedy, or like we like.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I'm gonna start using that. I'm stealing that, Brendan.
It's yours.
Yeah.
No copyright. It's all you. So you said you had another documentary in the works. Do you have anything else coming up? Any other fiction or documentary films you want to mention?
Man, yeah, that's an hour-long conversation. I'll give you the short one. So next week for the festival circuit, we're gonna have a short film about a Nazi general that escaped and lived in Argentina for 15 years before he was captured. It's like a true crimes genre, black and white illustrations. It'll be good. I've worked for the last 6 months prepping guys in drug recovery to make a movie about themselves. So this summer we're gonna film a short film narrative that they wrote with me about a character who's in drug recovery, like the first step, trying to figure out that he has a problem. And then I'm also going to have a team of interns with me filming a feature documentary about the guys trying to stay sober and make a movie. So that is called Clean Slate, is the name of the documentary, and the short film that they make is called On the Fence. So we're making that this summer. Last week I finished filming a feature film that's kind of secret. It's an art project, feature film. Just if people want to follow me on social media or my website, they'll know more about that one when that one's allowed to exist. And then the other one that we're editing right now is a feature doc about my friend named Dan, who was in the middle of his life, mid-40s, and was a single dad and had Parkinson's disease. And so Parkinson's, while he was a big band conductor, was making it very hard for him to conduct. So we filmed the short film about his life with like, wow, Dan, what does it mean for you when you've been a husband and a father and a musician your whole life, and now you're kind of none of those things anymore? So we filmed this movie about identity, and we put the camera down, and unfortunately that next summer Dan got the additional diagnosis of ALS, of Lou Gehrig's disease. So we just cried together, and then he was like, hey, how about you just film the rest of my life? So the rest of the movie is this incredible story of, it's a love story because a woman falls in love with him and marries him knowing that he's going to die. Then it's a love story that he falls in love with this small community in Rwanda somehow and ends up building an orphanage that now they're in Rwanda feeds, houses, and educates over 800 orphans. And he did all this in the last couple years of his life. So this movie's too big. It's like, it's too much. It's like jazz music and orphans and ALS and Parkinson's and heartbreak and love and identity. But right now we're like sorting through storyboards to try and figure out, okay, how do we tell this story in a way that you would actually believe it, So that's all my doc. Yeah. Oh, and the Trump documentary. I'm making a short film. That's what I'm editing today, is I'm editing a short film about this 19-year-old Trump voter who her family is voting for Donald Trump, and she doesn't know if it's the right thing to do. So I followed her for like 4 months leading up to the March 1st Super Tuesday vote here in Georgia. And that movie is powerful, especially in this election cycle where we're all just making everyone out to be idiots. Like, oh, if you don't vote like me, like you're an idiot. And I was trying to figure out what's my voice in this and how do I just stop vilifying the other people, even the people that I think are idiots, right? So I went and I hung out with this girl named Liz, and she is amazing. So by the end of the movie, you go with her to vote, and I guarantee you it will challenge what you think about like the other. So that movie is going to be hopefully ready for film festivals starting in August, September, October, before the election hits. So
just before, yeah.
That's the goal. We know there's a ticking clock on that movie, so that's why I got like next week to get it out to the guy who's going to do the soundtrack, color correction and stuff, so that we can get it into film festival submissions by June, July, so that we can hit the window on this film. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is, not to change the subject too much, but this election is probably well, I'm not even in the United States, and I'm reading all about it and seeing all about it, but it's probably one of the biggest ones in years.
Oh, man, it's the worst. Like, it's just the worst. Like, Liz says this movie at the end of the movie that's so powerful. She says, the people that I agree with politically, I don't like, and the people that I like, I don't agree with politically or trust. So what am I supposed to do? And you're just like, yeah, you're screwed. Like the way the game is set up, like people who are moderates, like people who aren't they're trying to make us believe that everyone's here or here, but everyone's really kind of here. And there's a couple people over here. So if you're in the middle and you're a Republican or a Democrat who's a moderate, you're screwed. Like, what are you gonna do? So it's just a really interesting. It's really sad and really gross, and it's the worst. It's like the worst. Like I just keep expecting a third candidate like to pop out and be like, by the way, I'll just be what everyone wants me to be, but that's not the way the game works or the money works. Or it's terrible. So yeah, this little 10-minute short film is gonna be my 2 cents, like my participation in the broken system. So
yeah, and like you're saying, yeah, I don't understand the whole this or that mentality.
Oh, it's so bad. So many countries are doing so much better than us. I don't know why we have the ability to just be like, it's pride, I guess, too.
We kind of have that here in Canada. We mostly we have 3 parties, but really 2. But yeah, it's a kind of a similar situation, but might be a reality star.
Yeah, go. She got her. Yeah, she's doing video blogs and she keeps sending them to me, and I'm amped on. I'm like, they're just like, it's like a 19-year-old figuring herself out and her worldview. But could you imagine growing up with like Twitter and Facebook? Like everything she thinks about these candidates, she watches the debates, which is more than most 19-year-olds, more than most people are doing in general. But then she's like live tweeting them. So she live tweets these debates, and what she's thinking about what they're saying live to her, it's literally coming through the filter of her Facebook feed or her Twitter feed. It's really, really interesting. It's almost just like a sociological study for me, to be like, wow, this is what it means to be 19 years old in the United States or in the South right now. It's really interesting. So.
Yeah, so I want to thank you very much for stopping by. And before I let you go, where can people check out Janey Makes a Play?
Yeah, the movie comes out in select cities on June 24th, Friday. But the next Tuesday, June 28th, is the day to support. So it'll be on iTunes, Vudu, maybe Hulu, Amazon Play, Google Plus, all of the places where you can buy or rent content online. It'll be there. And so Dish TV, DirecTV, it's all there. So iTunes is the best. If you could save it as a favorite on iTunes as soon as you see it. For reminders, you can go to janeymakesaplay.com, and there'll be an email list. You can find screenings in your area. But yeah, at Janey Makes a Play is all our social media, and my social media, I'm sure it'll be listed up there somewhere, is at Jared, Jared_Cal. So yeah, follow me for future updates about this project and other projects. That'd be great.
Awesome. And so, sorry, I'm going to get that again.
Yep.
It's June 24th?
June 24th in some cities. That's like LA, Atlanta, San Diego. We'll see if anybody else books. And June 28th online. And if you want to host a screening, because I want the movie to be used by groups, whether you're like community theater groups, colleges, schools, high schools, churches, whatever. If you can use the movie as a fundraiser, like the arts never have enough money. We never have enough money to make plays, right? And so you take the movie for like no fee up front, and you go show the movie to your people and charge money. And if people pay and come, great. Then send me a percentage and I'll keep spreading the movie. But if nobody shows up, then I'm not going to charge you a ton of money, and you have a fun movie night with your cast and crew. Like, my hope is that the movie spreads and also spreads the spirit of Janey, which is you can do it, tell your story, create art, and you can do it no matter who you are from age 4 to 94. So yeah, book a screening. Everything's on janeymakesaplay.com.
Awesome.
Yep.
There you go, guys. Plenty of ways to check this out. So it's about a little over a month. Well, by the time this posts, it'll probably be about a month.
Yeah.
So check it out. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cheers.